Ladies and gentlemen of Erie County, distinguished guests, family, and friends, we are gathered here today because both I and my opponent have different visions for the future of our district and the state of Pennsylvania as a whole. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of how I will serve my community in the state legislature, I need to tell you a little bit about myself. As someone who was brought up in a working-class Italian family, I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth, rather a wooden spoon in my behind. I was raised to have discipline. Growing up in Erie, I realized that there was a wealth of resources available to me that made me very humbled to live in such a compassionate community. My teachers, coaches, pastors, friends, and family all represented to me a close-knit, cohesive bond that could not be broken as long as our local area was looked to as an essential part of our lives. When I turned 18, I realized that there was no better way for me to serve my country and my community than enlisting in the United States Army. Eventually, my love of God and Christ necessitated me to take on a pastoral position in the United States Army as a chaplain. It was an honor and a privilege to serve with my fellow countrymen and provide them with spiritual guidance in the midst of war and conflict. That experience made me realize the inherent goodness and compassion in people as I heard countless stories from my Army brothers and sisters about their families back home, their trials, their tribulations, their loves, and their passions. It made me recognize that service to others, whether it is military service or public service, is the noblest endeavor for me to embark on in my life. Now, the Peters campaign has made vicious allegations about my time during the military and even went so far as to spread a rumor that I was dishonorably discharged. Peters lives in a delusional world where he thinks knowing a veteran makes him one. Peters knows nothing about being a veteran. Let me tell you, Mr. Peters, the community of veterans in Erie feels that you have brought nothing but shame to the military, and this is just another example of how the heroes of our country are politicized. It is a shame. I must say that this is a fallacious offense to my integrity as well as the integrity of the regiment I was assigned to. It reminds me of the Bible passage in Revelations 21:8 that says, "But as for the cowardly, the detestable, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." So, Mr. Peters, I suggest you invest in an AC unit because it is very hot where you're going in the not-so-distant future. Anyways, I digressed. Upon my return to Erie, I enrolled at Mercyhurst University as a political science and religious studies double major and eventually got my MBA from Duquesne. I have two beautiful children, Antonio and Nikki, and thought there was no better name for my new restaurant, for my first restaurant, that's named after my firstborn son. We currently have 6 Italian restaurants in Erie, West Mill Creek, and Edinboro, and have been very blessed to have such success in a region that, with our unique resources, allows the Erie region to thrive. Because I was so blessed and lucky enough to have such success in Erie, I looked at our community and our district as a breeding ground for innovation and success that must be maintained and invested in. As your state representative, I plan to work with the House Assembly to pass legislation that is not only beneficial to the state as a whole, but also to our home. I look forward to working with local organizations such as Destination Erie, a group composed of public, private, and nonprofit entities that collaborate on local issues in order to plan the future of our region with the main goal of having Erie as a hub of small businesses and economic growth. I will work with my environmentally conscious colleagues to create a 5% severance tax on natural gas in the state. With the fracking natural gas causing a variety of harms for the environment, it is essential that we protect our families and our communities from companies that look to make a quick buck at the expense of our vast natural resources. I pledge to double the amount of natural gas well inspectors in the state to ensure that our farmland, our drinking water, and our overall environment are not being harmed by the fracking process. That being said, my opponent closely aligns himself with the fracking industry and does not care about the environment and safety of the community, but rather lining his own pockets. I'll work with my colleagues to lessen the tax burden on working-class families that are the backbone of our nation, state, and region, and ensure that a more equitable tax system will be in place that is not detrimental to working-class citizens in Erie. I plan to work with the newly elected governor to bring funding back to education that was stripped away from the so-called fiscally responsible former governor, who also happened to allow our state to drop to dead last in job growth. I look to ensure that college-age students are not faced with insurmountable debt and unemployment at the completion of their degree. With the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, or FIA, having 12 million borrowers and $272 billion in student loans, we need to reform the higher education system and not allow our youngest, brightest citizens to come out of college with a crippling burden. We need to provide affordable preschool for our children through the Pre-K for PA initiative and stop cutting back on essential resources for our children that will allow them to thrive in the future. Now, my opponent can take as many photos as he wants with the children of our district and orchestrated photo shoot, but if he plans to cut our children's after-school programs, resources, and diminish the amount of well-qualified educators, is that truly being an advocate for education? Hell no. He thinks that having 2 educators in the region endorse him is enough to say that he's backed by educators in Erie, when we can see through my endorsements of every local teachers union, in addition to a whole variety of other teachers in the area, that they back me. So on that point, I'd like to say that education is a main priority on my platform. Lastly, when I'm elected to be your state representative, I'll ensure that the policies that I will pass will respect the diversity of our district and state. While my opponent advocates for voter ID laws that would restrict a wide variety of voters from being civically engaged, and has at numerous times throughout this campaign commented on his disdain for immigrants, the last time I checked, most people in this room are here because America was looked to as a land of prosperity, and our families chose to come here from foreign lands. Mr. Peters is quick to forget about where he comes from. I know where I come from. I know where my home is. My home, my community is right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. That is why we need to look to our statewide and local immigrant population as a benefit, not a detriment. People from all walks of life, different ethnicities, religious creeds, sexual orientations, think of Erie as a home. Therefore, I plan to represent our home, our community, and our district on behalf of all of our citizens, not just a select privileged few. It is both an honor and a privilege to run in this race to serve the Erie area, and Erie will always be on my mind and have a special place in my heart when I go to Harrisburg as your next state representative. Thank you.